guys, you're joining me on a special occasion. Today is the day that I tackle a game that I've wanted to review since the early days of the channel. Anyone who's been around since the beginning or has gone back for my archive should remember the Boomer's Adventure in Asmik World review. Well, I made a couple references to another Asmik published title in it. One of the more obscure companies that released a scant few titles for the system was Asmik, with a grand total of a whopping 3! Conquest of the Crystal Palace, Top Players Tennis, and WURM Journey to the Center of the Earth. If you want to play a game related to Boomer, I would suggest WURM, one of the Asmik NES titles. The seeds were laid in that 2-year-old video, and I'm beyond ecstatic to finally say that it's time to take a trip underground with WURM Journey to the Center of the Earth. Ah, crap! I knew this would happen! I better start the review before it gets any worse! WURM Journey to the Center of the Earth was released in November 1991. It was developed by Cyclone System and it was published by the aforementioned Asmik. WURM is a science fiction story that tells the tale of the crew of the VZR-5, led by Pilot Dan and Moby, the NES-era Samus Aran lookalike and hero of the journey. The intro cutscene doesn't really offer that much in the way of the plot. The VZR-5 ends up 50 miles underground and loses contact with the surface in the process. Moby states that one of the other VZRs was lost around this location, so they press on full speed ahead in hopes of recovering it. The manual fleshes out the narrative a bit more, claiming that all of the strange phenomena is taking place in 1999. What is it with NES games expecting civilization to go down the toilet in 1999? Sure, the Woodstock from that year had a few overturned porta potties, but that's not the same as volcanic eruptions destroying the planet! Anyway, 4 groups of scientists and Marines were sent out to investigate the source of the activity, and each of them became MIA. This is where Moby and company enter the picture. Moby in particular has a personal stake in the well-being of their lost comrades, since Ziggy, the engineer of the VZR-3, is her boyfriend, soulmate, I don't know, something like that. It's complicated. As the subtitle on the cart indicates, the game starts off with the VZR-5 in a cave-like setting many miles beneath the Earth. The manual refers to this as the HSS or Horizontal Scroll Shooting Mode. The HSS section may appear to be like any average horizontal shoot 'em up, but looking past the surface layer reveals that the VZR is built like a tank. Literally, a tank with a drill at the front of the vehicle. This is used in order to plow through the various obstacles in the path to the goal. The VZR starts out in T form and it's confined to the ground in this state. However, pressing up and A transforms it into the hover form. It becomes mandatory to change to the H form in later stages, since if you don't, this will happen. I would suggest hovering immediately at the beginning of every HSS part. Most of the action takes place in the higher elevations anyway, so there's really no point in using the flightless tank. The VZR has multiple weapon options. The preset is a triple shot that's sort of like the spread gun in Contra, but later levels result in enhancements to the VZR, like a weapon that scatters balls around the screen. This bombardment of balls, as it were, may look powerful, but the reality is that it isn't very effective, so my advice would be to just stick to the spread. As mentioned previously, WURM is far from a standard shoot 'em up, and further proof of this is in the inclusion of shield and fuel meters. The shield in particular is radically different from most shooters in that it functions as a sort of regenerating health meter. This means that the VZR can stay afloat as long as it doesn't take too much damage, which can happen really quickly. There were times where the ship was destroyed after being only hit twice. Finding the right balance between defensive and offensive playing was quite a feat, but I was able to persevere after a few attempts. In contrast to the shield, the fuel meter constantly depletes as the VZR moves along the underground area. I know from seeing this Asmik gem on a live stream a few years back that an empty fuel meter is akin to the VZR being destroyed from the lack of shields, but I don't have any footage to show of this since I never died from running out of gas. The reason for that is because there are plenty of fuel refill power-ups around each stage, so if things start to look dire, just keep on killing enemies and a refill is sure to pop up. Making it past all of the flying pests will trigger an earthquake. This happens during every VZR cutscene and it gets a bit annoying. Now that I think about it, the quakes only occur when the VZR is involved. I wonder. This is about as calm as it gets. I could almost take a nap here. Alright, let's head back to the VZR. Huh. No tremors. Perhaps I was wrong about... Oh, come on! The quake leads to another cutscene where Moby and Dan spot a life form on the radar, which just so happens to be the first boss! It's at this point that the HSS switches to the CSRP, or Cockpit Shooting Role-Playing Mode. We enter the VZR-5 in a first-person perspective, and the objective is to obviously take down the bad guy. This is accomplished by filling up the possibility meter to 100%. The meter is filled by seeking the advice of our fellow crewmates. Press B to bring up the menu, and then B again to access the Talk submenu. This requires trial and error since some crew members are more helpful than others. Early on, this isn't as much of a problem since everyone contributes somewhat to the meter, but the later levels are a pain in the ass. Some of them give completely useless information, which wastes one of the limited number of conversations the player has between each battle segment. However, there are some that actually take possibility and life points away by talking to them. Locke and G13 are the biggest offenders. A nerd and a malfunctioning robot. Go figure. Once you've determined which crew members are assets and which are incompetent, it's easy but time-consuming to take care of the task. Until the meter is filled, the boss will become more aggressive and charge towards the screen. They can take off a chunk of health if they hit the VZR-5, but this is easily negated by talking with certain crew members that increase the life points. After the meter is filled, just continue to spam the attack button and they'll be done in at a quick pace. After the creature is defeated, another cutscene pops up with yet another earthquake. Upon discovering that there are monsters underground, Moby decides to investigate further into the matter. She leaves the VZR-5 and WURM shifts into yet another new playstyle, SARP or Shooting Adventure Role-Playing Mode. In other words, WURM becomes a platformer. The platforming sections can be a bit confusing. Each one is multiple tiered with pits and locked Mega Man style gates. It can take a while to figure out the correct path, and I died a number of times from being accosted by the barrage of jumping jerks. Fun fact, the manual states that these guys are called Bill. I couldn't make this up if I tried. Bill the Alien Monster. What a wacky game. Fortunately, Moby has a few weapons in her arsenal to take out these creeps. First of all, she has a gun, which definitely helps in eliminating all of the pesky Bills, but it has limited ammo, or arms as the meter calls it. The second attack is a kick, which can work fairly well, but it requires close contact, so using it could result in more damage taken than given. The kick is controlled by the up button, which is kind of weird, and select probably would have been a better choice to map it to, but it is what it is. There are certain objectives that need to be completed before Moby can make it back to the VZR, most of which involve interactions with other humans like the dying VZR-2 crew member, Diane, the Princess of Dynamore, etc. The reason that certain gates won't open is because these characters pass on important information that advances the plot, so Moby can't progress until she meets them. After meeting them, these characters usually become part of the VZR crew and by doing so are added to the list of options in the talk menu of the boss fights. After interacting with all of the necessary characters, she will eventually run into Ichabod and Zolda, two prominent members of the evil non-Malta Empire. Moby briefly exchanges words with them before engaging in battle. Both of these foes are pretty easy, just keep shooting at them and eventually they'll take off for places unknown. After that, Moby heads back to the VZR, triggering another cutscene, and then it's on to the next act. Act 2 returns to the formula of the first, but with the inclusion of a new flight mode. With the help of the parts salvaged from the nearly destroyed VZR-2, the VZR-5 can now access its aerial or A form. The A transformation turns the VZR into a super jet fighter, which is performed by pressing up and A again after accessing the H form, and the onboard weapon is changed to a laser beam. The jet may look more sophisticated and sleek, but I found that it really didn't provide any advantage over the hovering tank. Plus, it doesn't have a drill, so it can't go through rocks without taking damage. Obviously, it all comes down to personal preference, and I prefer the H form, which pressing down in A will revert the VZR-5 back to. The hover tank is a beast, and the jet just can't compete against it. Clearing this HSS segment leads to the last playstyle that WURM has to offer, the VSS, or Vertical Scroll Shooting Mode. The VSS is exactly as the abbreviation indicates. The perspective switches to a top-down view, so WURM takes after Life Force and a number of other shooters that feature both genre types. Other than the change in perspective, there's not a lot that differentiates the HSS from the VSS. The VZR has the same options, the shield and fuel meters still have to be maintained, and the VZR still has to drill through obstructions. The enemies are slightly different, and one-hit kill roadblocks pop up in the later sections, but all in all, there's nothing radically different about this. Completing this leads to another cutscene, and then it's time for another CSRP boss battle. Defeating this boss leads to another cutscene, and then Moby exits the VZR for some more SARPing. Moby will run into more people and fight more monsters, as well as Zolda or Ichabod again, and once all of that's completed, it's on to the next act where the formula starts over again. The majority of WURM bounces back and forth between these playstyles, so it may get a bit repetitive, but the wacky and somewhat convoluted story really helps keep it from getting stale. The dialogue in WURM is pretty awful, but that's what makes it so charming. If I was forced to give an overall summary of the plot, I'm not sure that I even could. My brain would start to hurt if I tried. That's how convoluted it is. There are cryptic stone tablets scattered around the SARP stages with references to ancient races that never fully get addressed until the ending. For the sake of those who don't want to play WURM, I'll address some of the major plot points, but I'll put an annotation to skip ahead for those who want to avoid spoilers. Click that now, because I'm about to talk story in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. The first real significant event to occur is the capture of the VZR-5 by the non-Maltas in Act 3, and the kidnapping of Locke and Mike with it. All seems lost at first, but fortunately Alan, the engineer of the VZR-3, informs Moby that they found the VZR-4, which is still mostly operational. The VZR-4 is pretty much identical to the 5, with the exception that it can't access the aerial mode. Progressing through the VSS segment of Act 5 leads to the penultimate boss fight, which just so happens to be the VZR-5! Yes, you heard that right. Our former ship is now a mortal enemy. We're left with no choice but to take it down like the rest of the foes, and presumably Mike and Locke are killed in the process. I'll miss Mike. He served me well on many occasions. Locke, on the other hand, was a clueless tool, so he can burn in hell as far as I'm concerned. Another major story element is the current whereabouts of Ziggy. Davis, another VZR-3 engineer, states that Ziggy was sent to the lab. We later discovered that the boss of Act 4, Bandel, is the creation of an experiment at the lab. Bandel is part machine and part human. We learn more details about the lab from the chief of the VZR-4, Professor Banda, who, by the way, is Moby's father! If that wasn't already enough of a shocker, he drops the bombshell that the human brain that fueled the Bandel monster was Ziggy's. Yes, Moby's friend and possible love interest is dead, and Moby finally gets to profess her love for him, but it's while embracing his now lifeless corpse. It's a very sad moment, and the music perfectly fits the somber tone of a love lost. In spite of the pain that she feels, Moby presses on, determined to stop Sogals, the leader of the non-Maltas, and ensure the safety of the King of Dynamore. The final level, and in particular the final boss, is pretty clever. Previous cutscenes bring up the recurring theme of the 4 crystals and how important they are. Well, the Battle with Sogals finally puts them to use. Instead of talking with the crew, the 4 crystals have to be chosen in the correct order, which is the means by which the possibility meter is filled. Try to get the order correct as quickly as possible, since wrong choices will result in health points being removed from the meter. Once it reaches 100%, the VZR's attack, fueled by the power of the crystals, will take the fiend down with a few presses of the B button. WURM's ending is disappointing, to say the least. A holographic projection plays and it provides more backstory, which doesn't really make much sense. Basically, the ancient overworld inhabitants feuded with the peaceful underworld residents and many wars waged, leading into ultimate destruction by nuclear winter. The long and short of it is that it's a call for peace. The message will hopefully keep the non-Maltas and the people of Earth from committing the same mistakes as their ancestors. That's it. We don't really have any resolution with the story. For all we know, Moby could end up going on a killing spree over being distraught over Ziggy's death. Perhaps another nuke will wipe out civilization. We don't know, and we'll never know. It's very ambiguous and not very satisfying, but that's the end of the VZR adventures. In spite of the lackluster ending, WURM is still very worth playing. Few games on the NES can claim to be a shoot-'em-up and a platformer, and this places near the top of the multi-genre titles. Usually one style is favored over another when developers dream up grand concepts like this, but the modes in WURM are equally balanced. I would even go as far as saying that it's just about on par with Vice Project Doom, the king of the genre benders on the NES. On top of all of that, WURM's soundtrack, composed by Dota Ando, is excellent and one of my personal favorites on the system. You really can't go wrong with WURM, and it can still be picked up for less than $20 shipped online. I highly recommend hopping aboard the VZR5 for this bizarre yet fascinating journey. Now that I've taken care of this review that had been put on the back burner for far too long, it's time for another appearance in the IUPG court. And again? Really? I'm so sick of all this shaking! Anyway, I'm gonna head back up to the surface. I'll see you guys on April 1st for the next Innocent Till Proven Guilty. This is gonna be a major one that you won't want to miss. Bye, guys! Thanks for watching, guys. Like I said before, come back on April 1st for the next Innocent Till Proven Guilty, but until then, I got some more videos for you to watch, like always. On the upper left-hand corner, I got my Asterix review, Asterix and the Great Rescue for the Sega Genesis from Cygnus Destroyed Retro Reviews. Reason I'm putting it? Well, it's a good review, and on top of that, there's a hint there at the end. Well, I pretty much flat out say what the next Innocent Till Proven Guilty is going to be. It's near the end, you'll see it. Now, in the upper right-hand corner, you got the Sonic 30 Blast episode of Innocent Till Proven Guilty. It's a good one. First time Sonic has entered the Innocent Till Proven Guilty court, but not the last, I can tell you that much. There'll be a number of other Sonic games that make an appearance on that show, so stay tuned for that. Now, on the bottom left-hand corner, you got the last LJN Defender on the WWF NES games. Good episode, I had a lot of fun making it. Mad Matt makes a return appearance. Gotta love that. And as always, if you like what you saw and you're a person who's new to my channel, well then hit that red box right there and it'll subscribe you to my channel and you'll be kept up to date with all of the current content. So, like I said before, come back on April 1st for the next Innocent Till Proven Guilty, but until then, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye!